these Bible stories don't need faith to understand them. They need honesty. This is Anti-Sermons, where we stop protecting the text, stop centering the men, and finally tell the truth about the women who were used, erased, and survived anyway. If you've ever been told to stay quiet, to endure, to be good, no matter what it costs you, you're in the right place. Now this story right here, this is what happens when people call abuse God's plan. Welcome back to Anti-Sermons. This is episode 9, Hagar, the victim. Hagar's introduction. Genesis 16:1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. Sitting with the introduction, this is the very first time Hagar appears in the biblical text. She is introduced in a single sentence. She is not introduced with a genealogy. She is not introduced with a backstory. She is not introduced with a voice. She is introduced as an Egyptian slave. Before we know anything about what will happen to her, the text tells us 3 things. 1, she belongs to Sarai. 2, she is enslaved. 3, she is Egyptian. Her existence in the story is framed entirely around someone else's problem. Sarai has borne no children. Hagar does not enter the narrative because of who she is. She enters because of what she can be used for. And yet, unlike so many unnamed enslaved women in Scripture, she is given a name. That matters. Hagar. That alone sets her apart from so many women in Scripture who remain unnamed, unseen, and interchangeable. But even her name tells us something important. The name Hagar does not have one settled meaning. Jewish scholars and biblical scholars have debated its origins for centuries. Some readings associate her name with the stranger, the foreigner, the sojourner. Other theories suggest a connection to fleeing or flight, though that interpretation is debated. Some scholars suggest the name may not even be Hebrew in origin. What matters is not that scholars agree. What matters is the pattern. Her name is repeatedly understood through displacement, through otherness, through not belonging. Her name gets read as the stranger in Jewish and scholarly reflections, fitting for an Egyptian woman living in a Hebrew household. So even when the text gives her a name, that name marks her as outside. She is named, but she is still the foreigner, still the one who does not belong, still the one whose presence is tolerated only because she is useful. Before Hagar ever runs into the wilderness, before she ever becomes pregnant, before she ever encounters God, the text has already told us where she stands. She is not just enslaved, she is the stranger. Egypt, Canaan, and enslaved people. The text tells us plainly that Hagar is Egyptian. That raises a natural question. How plausible is it that an Egyptian woman would be enslaved in a Hebrew household? Historically, very plausible. During the Bronze Age, Egypt and Canaan were deeply intertwined. They were connected through trade routes, diplomacy, labor systems, migration, and later political control. Canaan was not isolated from Egypt. It was influenced by it, negotiated with it, and at times dominated by it. People moved between these regions. Goods moved, power moved, and so did enslaved people. Households in the ancient Near East regularly included enslaved individuals from outside their own ethnic or cultural group. Foreign slaves were not unusual. They were expected. So an Egyptian woman living in servitude with a Canaanite household does not stretch history, it reflects it. We cannot prove how common it was for Hebrews to own Egyptian slaves specifically. The Bible patriarchal stories do not give us a census data, but nothing about this arrangement is historically strange. What is striking is not that Hagar is Egyptian. What is striking is that her identity is preserved at all. The text does not let her blend into the background. It does not let her become just another servant. It tells us where she is from. She is Egyptian. She is enslaved, and she is living in a household that is not her own. This is not myth. This is the ordinary reality of power in the ancient world. How Hagar is taught in Jewish tradition. Hagar does not only have a story in Genesis, she also has a story in interpretation. In Jewish tradition, especially in Midrash and later rabbinic commentary, Hagar is often treated as more than an Egyptian slave. Some rabbis attempt to elevate her status, sometimes reshaping how her story is understood. One of the most well-known rabbinic traditions, echoed by commentators such as Rashi, suggests that Hagar was not simply an enslaved Egyptian woman, but connected to Egyptian royalty, often described as Pharaoh's daughter, given into Sarah's household after Sarah's time in Egypt. The purpose of that tradition is clear. It insists that Hagar had dignity before she had chains, that she had a life before she was enslaved, that she mattered before she was used. There is also a later interpretive tradition that identifies Hagar with Keturah, a woman Abraham is said to marry after Sarah's death. This identification is debated, and the biblical text itself does not explain it. Some accept it, some reject it. What matters here is not resolving the question, but noticing the impulse behind it. Interpreters seem uncomfortable leaving Hagar outside the household. They look for ways to bring her back, to soften her ending, to fold her story back into Abraham's. Even when Jewish tradition portrays Hagar as perceptive, faithful, or dignified, the interpretive gravity still pulls toward Abraham and Sarah as the center of the story. Hagar becomes important because of how she relates to them. But if we're honest, Hagar is important because she is a human being who was enslaved, exploited, and harmed, and the text refuses to let her disappear entirely. Here is a synopsis of what the text says. Hagar is an Egyptian woman who is enslaved in the household of Sarai and Abram. Sarai cannot have children, and she decides that Hagar will be used to solve that problem. Sarai gives Hagar to Abram, and Abram has sex with her. Hagar does not initiate this. She does not consent in any meaningful way. She is enslaved, and her body is used to produce a child for someone else. Hagar becomes pregnant. After she becomes pregnant, the power dynamics in the household shift and conflict arises. Sarai responds by treating Hagar harshly. The text does not describe the details of the harsh treatment, but it is severe enough that Hagar runs away. Hagar flees into the wilderness. There she is found and spoken to. She is told to return to Sarai and submit. She is also told that she will give birth to a son, that his name will be Ishmael, and that her descendants will be numerous. Hagar names God in this moment and returns. Hagar gives birth to Ishmael. Years later, after Sarai gives birth to Isaac and Isaac is weaned, Sarai demands that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. Abraham sends them out with minimal supplies. Hagar and Ishmael wander in the wilderness. Their water runs out. Hagar believes her son is going to die. She places him at a distance and weeps. They are seen again. Water is provided. They survive. Ishmael grows up in the wilderness separate from Abraham's household. That is the story. How Hagar is taught in Christianity. In Christianity, Hagar is rarely taught as a woman with a story. She is taught as an idea. The most influential Christian interpretation of Hagar comes from the Apostle Paul in Galatians 4. There, Hagar is turned into an allegory. Paul contrasts Hagar and Sarah as two covenants. Hagar represents slavery. Sarah represents freedom. Hagar represents law. Sarah represents promise. In that framework, Hagar stops being an enslaved woman who was used and harmed. She becomes a theological symbol. Her suffering becomes illustrative rather than urgent. Her body becomes an object lesson rather than a life. Early church fathers followed this pattern. Augustine reads Hagar almost entirely through allegory. She represents the old covenant, earthly Jerusalem, bondage. Sarah represents grace, the heavenly city, freedom. John Chrysostom emphasizes obedience and submission in the story. Hagar's return is framed as an example of humility rather than a survival decision made under coercion. Later Christian interpreters, including reformers like Calvin, continue this trend. Hagar is discussed in terms of divine order, hierarchy, and God's purposes. Her return is justified as necessary. Her suffering is treated as secondary to the fulfillment of the promise. Across these teachings, a consistent pattern emerges. Hagar's pain is acknowledged but not centered. Her abuse is mentioned but not confronted. Her obedience is praised, but the system she obeys is left intact. And over time, this interpretation does something dangerous. It turns go back into a spiritual principle. It turns submission into a virtue detached from justice. It teaches that God's will is best served by endurance rather than safety. So Hagar becomes a lesson Christians learn early, that God may see suffering but still require you to stay inside it. This is not how Christians are taught to read Hagar. This is how Christians are taught to use her. What I was taught about Hagar and what I see now. Growing up, I don't remember being taught many details about Hagar's story. What I remember being taught was Sarah. Sarah was one of the few women in the Bible who was named, and that mattered in church. She was held up as an example. Sarah was supposed to teach me patience. Sarah was supposed to teach me how not to doubt God. Sarah was supposed to teach me submission. We've already talked about Sarah, about how she became part of the system. Instead of questioning patriarchy and misogyny, she learned how to operate inside it. She learned how to survive it. She learned how to enforce it. And somehow, without anyone ever saying it outright, Hagar was taught to me as Sarah's opposite. I don't know why. I don't know how. That's how it landed. Hagar was framed as the problem, as the outsider, as the complication. When people talk about Hagar, they read things into the text that were never there. They suggested she must have been disrespectful, that she must not have been obedient enough, that she must have done something to deserve being treated harshly. None of that is in the story, but that is the story I was taught. And now reading this text as an adult after deconstructing, I am furious because Hagar is nothing but a victim from beginning to end. And that is almost never acknowledged in Christian teaching. Hagar is a slave. She is owned. When Sarah doubts God's promise, Hagar is given to Sarah's husband. Abram has sex with her. An enslaved woman cannot consent. This is not a choice. This is not surrogacy. This is rape. And if we are being honest about how bodies work, this did not happen once. It happened repeatedly until she became pregnant. Hagar does exactly what she is used for, and then Sarah turns on her. Sarah treats her harshly. The text doesn't describe how, but it doesn't have to. We already know the system is abusive. Hagar runs. She escapes. She gets out. And then something unbearable happens. God finds her in the wilderness. A God that is not hers. A God tied to the household that enslaved her. The God who sees. There is one moment in Hagar's story that is easy to miss if we rush past it. After being used, abused, and driven into the wilderness, Hagar does something no one else in the Bible has done up to this point. She names God. In Genesis 16, Hagar calls God El Roi, which means the God who sees. This is not a title given by Abraham. It is not a name passed down by tradition. It is not part of the covenant language. It is a name an abused, enslaved woman gives to the God who noticed her when no one else did. But notice what this does and does not mean. Being seen did not stop her abuse. Being seen did not free her. Being seen did not protect her from being sent back. So when Hagar names God as the one who sees, she is not endorsing what happened to her. She is naming the one moment in the story where her suffering is acknowledged. And that matters because being seen is not the same as being saved. And so he tells her to go back. He promises her a son. He tells her what to name him, Ishmael. But that promise is empty because this child is not meant to be hers. He is meant to belong to Sarah and Abraham. She does not get to choose his name. She does not get to decide his future. Her body is being used to solve someone else's problem. She goes back. She endures more abuse. She gives birth. And for a moment, it looks like that was the reason she was sent back, to finally give Abraham a son. But that isn't the end of the story because once Sarah has her own son, once Isaac is born and weaned, Sarah becomes jealous again, and this time Hagar and Ishmael are cast out. They are sent into the wilderness with barely enough to survive. They are sent out to die. Abraham never truly takes Ishmael as his son. Everything done to Hagar's body, every violation, every humiliation, every act of endurance amounts to nothing. Sarah doubted God. Hagar paid the price. And this cycle is not just ancient, it is taught every week. Women go to their church leaders and say they are being abused. They are told, go back, pray harder, be a better wife, submit more, try harder, keep the house cleaner, have dinner ready, put out more. Children report abuse, they are told, go back. We'll talk to your parents. They need counseling. Victims report abuse in churches, they are told it wasn't the church. We've handled the man. And that man is quietly moved somewhere else while the victim is expected to stay, to go back, to submit again. This is Hagar's story retold over and over. This is why Hagar's story matters to me, because what she was told to go back, to endure, to submit is not ancient. It is still being taught. I know this because I lived it. Long before my first husband ever tried to kill me, I told people what was happening, and the people I told were Christians. One person told me that sometimes abuse is the price you pay for being married to a man of quality. My husband was a barback at a casino. Where was the quality? What exactly was I supposed to be paying for? Others told me I needed to pray harder. They told me there was a demon of alcoholism in my house, that I needed to pray for Jesus to release it. Others told me to look at myself, to examine what I was doing to cause the abuse, to go back and try harder. And I listened because that is what women are taught to do. Until one night, he beat me so severely. He wrapped his hands around my throat and he tried to choke the life out of me. My baby son was in the other room with his abuelita. I remember yelling, call 911 in Spanish. I was hoping my mother-in-law would hear me. I was hoping someone would help. My husband was sitting on the bed. I was on the ground between his legs. He was choking me. In that moment, I remembered something a Christian man had told me years earlier. He told me he had abused his wife. He said he had turned his life around and became a Christian. But he also told me what saved his wife's life. He said she fought back. And sitting there with my son in the other room with my life on the line, I remembered that and I understood exactly what it meant. I remember thinking that I needed to bite him to get him off of me. I thought I would bite his thigh. But when I was yelling, call 911, he moved to cover my mouth with his hand. And when he did, I bit down on his hand as hard as I possibly could. I bit flesh out of his hand. That is how I survived. It has been many years since then. He has passed away. I did get away, but barely. And this is why go back is not a neutral teaching. Women killed by men are almost always killed by someone they know, and more than half are killed by an intimate partner, states Violence Policy Center Government Affairs Director Kristen Rand. Much more must be done to identify and implement effective strategies to prevent these tragedies. More resources are needed at the federal, state, and local levels to help keep women safe. If we are serious about keeping women safe, then maybe, just maybe, we stop telling women to go back to their abusers. That would be a good fucking place to start. So let's come back to Hagar. Not the allegory, not the cautionary tale, not the problem woman, not the symbol, the person. Hagar was a survivor. She was an enslaved woman who endured sexual violence. She was a mother who protected her child. She was a woman who returned because survival sometimes leaves you no other choice. She was a woman who endured again. She was a woman who was cast out and still kept her child alive. She did not fail. She was failed. She tried to do the right thing. She tried to obey. She tried to survive within the limits placed on her. And for that, she was abused by Sarah. She was abused by Abraham, and yes, she was abused by a God who told her to return to the people who were harming her. We can dress it up, we can theologize it, we can turn the story into metaphors and allegories and greater purposes. It's a story of an enslaved woman who was used. She was punished for surviving, she was told to go back, and when she finally became inconvenient, she was thrown away. That is Hagar's story. And the reason it still matters is because the Bible treats her the same way the church still treats abuse victims today. Endure, submit, forgive, go back. Hagar is not holy because she obeyed. She is holy because she survived. She is not a lesson in submission. She is a witness against systems that demand it. If there is anything sacred left in this story, it is not obedience, it is endurance, it is resistance. It is a mother who refused to let her child die alone in the wilderness. Hagar does not need to be redeemed. She does not need to be rehabilitated. She does not need to be folded back into Abraham's legacy. She deserves to be believed. And if there is a God worth listening to after this story, it is not the God who said, go back. It is the God Hagar named for herself, the one who sees. And seeing is not telling someone to endure harm. Seeing is standing with them when they leave it. El Roi is not a compliment. We are usually taught that when Hagar names God El Roi, the God who sees, it is a moment of comfort. I don't think it is. What if Hagar is not praising God? What if she is calling God out? What if she is saying, you saw everything. You saw what they did to me. You saw my body used. You saw my fear. You saw me run. You saw me free. And you sent me back anyway. You were not ignorant. You are a witness. And witnesses who do nothing are not innocent. They are complicit. When Hagar names God as the one who sees, she is not excusing him, she is indicting him. You saw, you knew, and you allowed it. And this is why her story still matters, because we live in a world full of people who see abuse and do nothing. Men who see it, church leaders who see it, communities who see it, systems who see it. And instead of stopping it, they say, go back, endure, submit, forgive. Don't make waves. Don't ruin a good man. Don't damage the system. We say it's all men until it's no men. Until the moment comes to intervene. Until the moment comes to risk something. Until the moment comes to protect a woman instead of her reputation. Hagar's story exposes that lie. Seeing is not enough. Knowing is not enough. Belief without action is not righteousness. If you see abuse and tell someone to return to it, you are not neutral, you are not loving, you are not holy. You are participating. So no, Hagar does not name God to comfort us. She names him to confront us. You saw. Now what are you going to do about it? Seeing abuse and doing nothing is still saying, go back. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is participation.
Men didn't have the nerve to name you, not with truth, not with blood on their hands. They spoke around you, over you, safe behind their power and plans. They praised what you did for them. They trembled as you gave your name. They wouldn't dare think to name you. No, that would be my claim to fame. I didn't bow when you found me alone. No one else to hear what I'd say. You didn't offer a name for me to whisper, so I named you from my view of you that day. You didn't offer me a covenant, no altar, no future, no claim. What I had was a body for trading, and the courage to give you a name. The God who sees, nothing can hide from you. The God who sees, story's been told for generations, passed along from voice to ear. I called you the God who sees, but it's not how it appears. Like a game of telephone, it traveled, every telling changed the view. Each preaching made it softer, each repeat a little more askew. You saw it, you saw it. Far from my home, isolated, afraid, a body alone in a borrowed land. You saw saw me doing what I had to do, trying to obey their every command. You saw the cruelty, saw it plain, saw her hand me over like a toy. You saw what was taken again and again. You saw my body and heart destroyed. I ran when escape came into view. Believe distance might set me free, but you found me there in the wilderness and sent me back to what you could see. I named you the God who sees. They heard it as something kind. They said you saw my heart, said it was part of your design. It was never meant a compliment. I named you the God who sees. It was always an indictment. You see it all and do nothing. You see the children, you see their pain, their hunger, their bruises, their abuse. You see the men who harm them while claiming they worship you. You see global wars, you see the suffering, you see it all from your throne and do nothing. You saw it, 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 you saw it. I didn't name you by accident, I didn't kneel, I didn't plead. I gave you a name that fit. I named you the God who sees. You saw it, 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 you are the God who sees. You saw it, you saw it, you saw it.
And that's today's anti-sermon. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, comment, rate, or review the podcast. It really helps more people find the show. And if you'd like to support the podcast financially, check out my link tree in the show notes. There are several ways you can support the show and the work that I do. You can also find me on TikTok and YouTube. I am Crystal J, Crystaljae. And remember, I'm Nice Lady.